Welcome. My name is Michael McSherry. I'm the pastor of Edwards Church, and it is my great privilege to welcome you here this afternoon for what I'm sure will be both an informational and incredibly moving, uplifting, inspirational, challenging. I'm going to run out of adjectives. You're going to be glad you were here. I hope you get a little bit upset and a lot motivated. It was my pleasure to hear from Reverend Nelson and Joyce earlier today, to meet them and get to know a little bit about their work. And if you've been in Northampton for a little while, you know Mark. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Hector Figueroa from the Markham-Nathan Fund for Social Justice to come forward and to act as our MC for the day. Please welcome Hector.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Hector Figueroa. I'm a member of the Markham-Nathan Fund for Social Justice. I live in Greenfield. It's such a beautiful thing to see all of you here as we come together to commemorate the 40th anniversary of a horrible tragedy, the Massacre in Greensboro, North Carolina, 40 years ago this year. Before we get started, I want to thank Reverend McSherry for having us today in Edwards Church. Thank you so much. A special thank you to the musicians, Professor Al Mosley, Dave Boydman, and Matt Ryan. Thank you so much for playing such beautiful tunes today. Also, thank you to the two special people that are videotaping and photographing today's event free of charge. Jared Skolnick, thank you so much. And also, last but not least, to the members of the Markham-Nathan Fund for Social Justice board members who helped put this event together today. Thank you, guys. So today is it's a very special day, and we're going to get started. Let me just tell you a little bit about the Markham-Nathan Fund for Social Justice. It got started in 2009 by Marty Nathan and Archie Markham. Archie passed away in 2018 at the young age of 102. She was an amazing person, and probably many of you in the audience know her. These two wonderful women got together to start this fund in memory of their husbands. Dr. Mike Nathan was one of those killed in the Greensboro Massacre 40 years ago, and George Markham also was an organizer, social justice organizer, both trailblazers. So the fund was started in 2009 to raise funds to give to help organizations in our area, in Western Mass, small organizations, social justice organizations. And I know many of you who work for those organizations are here today, so thank you so much for being here. So we provide small grants, and that go a long way for these organizations that have very small budgets, small number of staff members, but they do amazing work. And it's work that is much needed in our community. So thank you to them for being here. Yesterday we had an organizers meeting that took place in Springfield. Unfortunately, I was not able to make that, but Reverend Nelson Johnson and Dr. Joyce Johnson were there, and the conversations that took place were very fruitful, and hopefully we'll get to hear some of that today and share that with you. But first, we're gonna get started. In August of this year, the Northampton City Council passed a resolution declaring Sunday, October 6th, a day of commemoration of the 1979 Greensboro Massacre, which encourages the residents of Northampton to gather that day in remembrance of the historical victims of hate crimes and in the dedication to the ongoing struggle against white supremacy of all forms of bigotry. So I would like to welcome Northampton City Council Vice President Bill Dwight, who will now read the resolution.
Just for clarification, I'm not the vice president. I'm not in charge of anything, just so we're clear. I became aware of the Greensboro Massacre 10 years ago, actually, when we wrote a resolution similar to the one that we did now. And what was startling to me was that I wasn't aware of it. I like to think that I was fairly conscious of various crises and insults to our history, and this one really caught me short. And I'd known Marty for some time at that point, and had not realized her connection to this. So we did draft a similar resolution then, and what's worth noting is the continuum of the violent expression and less violent expression of white supremacy throughout this country that has really not abated, and in fact has been given permission almost most recently. To emphasize that continuum, in fact, one of the Nazis that stepped out of their truck on that day at the Greensboro Massacre later went on in 2014, while screaming Heil Hitler, killed 3 people in Kansas City. And it's kind of a perverse metaphor for that continuum that I just described. So it is in that context that when we were invited to introduce another resolution that we drafted this one. It's not particularly flowery, but it really does get to the point. So, in the City Council, August 15th, 2019, upon the recommendation of Councilor William H. Dwight, Councilor Dennis P. Bidwell, and Mayor David J. Narkowitz, a resolution declaring October 6, 2019, a day to commemorate the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and to reflect on white supremacy. Whereas 2019 marks the 40th anniversary of the Greensboro, North Carolina Massacre, where 5 demonstrators, while preparing for an anti-Ku Klux Klan rally, were shot and killed by members of the Klan and the American Nazis, leaving 10 other demonstrators wounded. And whereas white supremacists are still active in America, spreading hate and murdering people in the streets, churches, synagogues, and other gathering places in our communities. And whereas the events in Greensboro 40 years ago, and the events of El Paso at this time, it was 2 weeks ago, we've had some since then when this was introduced, remind us of the necessity to challenge white supremacy in all its forms. And whereas the survivors of the Greensboro Massacre will be commemorating the massacre on October 6, 2019 in Northampton with programs honoring their loved ones and friends lost in 1979, remembering the other victims of white supremacy, reflecting on the lessons learned from the massacre, and examining how this history informs the struggle against white supremacy today. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Northampton, Massachusetts designates Sunday, October 6, 2019, a day of commemoration of the 1979 Greensboro Massacre, and encourages the residents of Northampton to gather that day in remembrance of the historical victims of hate crimes and in the rededication to the ongoing struggle against white supremacy and all forms of bigotry.
Thank you, Bill. So we're now going to move on and show you a film. It's about 20 minutes or so. And it recounts the events of that day, interviews from survivors. If we're ready.
The I feel like going on. I feel like going on. Though trials come on every hand, I feel like going on. I feel like pressing my way. I feel like pressing my way. Though trials come on every hand, I feel like pressing my way. Good afternoon, Northampton, and Springfield, and Holyoke, and Chicopee Falls, and the mic's not on.
Let's see what we can
But
do.
good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Does that work?
So good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you, and we like to give a little space each time to regather our spirits. Singing is one way I do it, in note and out of note, but in the spirit. And just recall Markham-Nathan, a classmate of mine at Duke University in the 60s. Jim Waller, Jim Blackbeard Waller, Bill Sampson, Cesar Causé, a Cuban immigrant, and a little sister that we adopted, a Bennett College for Women graduate, Sandy Lee Neely Smith, and bring their spirits, their struggles in this room into our hearts and minds as we share the story more deeply, but hopefully talk together, consider together how to move forward from that tragedy to really us and our children and our grandchildren embrace a triumph for the human spirit, a triumph where we build a beloved community where the dignity, the equality, the worth, and the enormous potential of every person is appreciated and fought for. You see that we are teary-eyed, but we don't apologize for those tears. I've come to understand that the tears are a basis for growing flowers. Flowers of love, and it's more respect and appreciation, and we have to touch our human spirits and not have these false presentations of bravado. We have to be brave, but we have to also admit our vulnerability and our connections to one another. So if you haven't figured out by now, I'm Joyce Johnson, and I'm here with beloved friends Markham-Nathan and my beloved husband of 50 years, Nelson Johnson. And we're just happy to be here. We thank the pastor of the church. I had a list that I can't get to right now, but certainly Reverend McSherry and the members of this wonderful congregation where we were able to worship together and take communion together this morning, and those who are videographing, and Laurel Seals, who's from Greensboro, North Carolina, who put together that wonderful. She too has traveled along with us on this journey, so there's a lot of other footage that you will find on the Beloved Community YouTube channel. Our young folk tell me about this and other things we're doing. But certainly the Markham-Nathan Foundation as well. Thank you, Hector, and others that we have met here. because we're all in this venture together. And it was wonderful being with the young people yesterday, and I hope some of them are here today, as we have to figure out how to go across the generations and link together this struggle. As one of our mentors, Vincent Harding, taught us, it is a river. And we have to make sure that river continues to flow so that we can flow toward that beloved community. So I'm going to step back now and invite Marty or Nelson to share in whatever way they would like to. We hope that there will be the opportunity for dialogue with you, because it's not that we come here as experts. We've had some experiences, some horrific experiences on the one hand, but as Marty said in the video, really some experiences that propelled us to become closer to you and other freedom-loving folks. As Bernice Reagan and others have said to us, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
We obviously put a lot of effort into letting you know that we were doing this today. Didn't put as much into what actually, how we were going to organize it once we're here. I want to give deep thanks to Nelson and Joyce and to all the people who sponsored this and helped us bring it together. I want to talk about those lessons because I learned so much from the horror and the pain. We found out that a system, in particular in Greensboro, it was textile mills and textile owners and their friends, the police, and their friends, the local FBI agents, who they met with at the country club. We found that they had the capacity to murder us in order to stop a movement that would cut into their profits. And it was that simple. We have no doubt that others were involved in it. So it wasn't that simple, but the concept was. And why do we need to talk about that in 2019, 40 years later? You know, a lot of people would say, bury that. That is not of interest. That's old history. But I would argue with you till the cows come home that it is not old history. I'm a climate justice person. How many of you were here 2 weeks ago on the steps of City Hall with me demanding that we stop catastrophe of climate change and global heating? How many were here? Why are we not doing that? We are not doing that, and in the process, sealing the fate of millions around the world to rising seas and heat and drought and hunger because of profit, because of Exxon, because of Coke, because of Shell, because of BP, because of Trump, who is their symbol and their waiver of the wand to get rid of all regulations and to stop the progress that we must have in order to end the lives, to stop the extinction of hundreds of thousands of species around the earth. We were there because we were demanding, lo and behold, that workers have the right to unionize, that poor people who are the most affected by climate change, people of color, indigenous people, actually have a right to say what's going to happen in that transition. Be in charge of it. transform upside down our economy in a way that will serve all of us, rather than the same ones who got us into this filthy mess to begin with. And you know what? That's what those 5 people, those young, gorgeous people, were doing in Greensboro back 40 years ago. And they were killed. They were murdered. And the system did do it. And the system is not, it's not nebulous. The system is people with guns and people behind them paying them because they have the money. And letting them know that they would get a free ride if they killed them. If we fight for change, as we absolutely must in this era, for the survival of humanity, and you and I know this, we must fight, there will be repression, because we are up against a system that lives and dies on profit and violence. But you know what we learned in Greensboro? That they killed us, and we grieved, and we lost, and we were wounded to the core. But we loved each other. And we believed in the spirit of humanity, which we saw in the faces of each one of us as we went to meetings and shared our kids and shared our food and shared our bedrooms and shared everything that we had because we had nothing left. We learned that there is something that goes deeper than profit, that goes deeper than conspiracy to protect profit, and that is the possibility of the human spirit acting together. I'm a socialist, and that's what that means for me. And I touch bases with Mike just about every day. I talk to Mike, my husband. My first husband, I was lucky as can be to have 2 wonderful husbands. But I touch bases with Mike to see if I'm doing what I should be doing. And you know what? All I get back is, keep on trying. This is our community, and our community can fight against climate change, can fight against repression, can fight against nuclear war, can fight against accidents that aren't accidents in the mills, can fight against war, and all the things that profit brings about. And I asked you, my friends, in this beloved city, to join me. I have shared my deepest secrets and my sorrows with you, and I thank you for accepting me as one of your own.
As I said this morning from the pulpit, what we're dealing with is very, very deep and very systematic. And you now know more about the 5 people that were murdered on November 3rd, 1979 than 95% of the people in the city of Greensboro.
That's right.
They have never seen or heard much of what you saw and heard today. If you had asked me in 1978 whether the city that I've been in for 14 years won many victories, brought together the black community, working with people, if you had asked me if you could shut down a city and change the narrative so dramatically, I would have said you're joking. But I lived through that myself, and therefore I want to I really appreciate that we have a global problem, of which the U.S. is the biggest part of it. But there are many other partners in it. And we have to appreciate that. There is also the particularity of things. And we have to appreciate that. Because the fight back required certain things of us. So during our time this afternoon, I hope we can get a little deeper in exactly what happened. How did it happen? Why did it happen? What was the nature of our fight back, and what are the lessons that we can take out of here today? And that requires some dialogue between us. But let me kind of get started this way. That I was the chief representative of the organization on that day, and therefore I negotiated the parade permit. So that's the start, but I know what I'm talking about. It's not something I read, it's not something I heard. I sat in the front of Captain Gibson, and we mapped out the parade permit, and at the end of it, he leaned across the desk and said that you have to sign this document that nobody at the parade will be armed, concealed, or unconcealed. And I said, Captain, why are you doing this? Do you know something I don't know? He said that if you want a parade permit, you have to sign it. This is after denying a parade permit for almost 2 weeks that the policy at that time said you get in 3 days, 72 hours. So we had people coming from all over the state, from Danville, Virginia, from Martinsville, from Rocky Mountain, the Raleigh, and the Durham and Charlotte, and the textile industry in Greensboro with no parade permit. And when I would go down and try to get it, they would say the police are out of town. Well, you know, I was thinking, what is the police doing out of town? But all of that's to say, we were right up on the day to get the parade permit and didn't have one. And when we got it, it had that stipulation on it. And I sensed something, but I didn't know what it was. And so when we met that night before the parade, the issue was we have a right to self-defense. But if we actually break this law, it'll give the police the opportunity to rush in on us and arrest us. And so in our little defense meeting, or what do you call it, security meeting, and I just want to take a minute and talk about this. It was, what do we do? And my view was that the Klan would not ride into a black community in the middle of the day where the police were going to be there and open fire on a group. I was wrong. I want to say that. And it wasn't exactly the Klan, it was the Klan and the police. And that's what made the difference. And what we thought, if we came out armed, and I really demonstrated this, the police had been after us for a while. And if somebody had a pistol and their coat flew open, and everybody would say, protect it, brother, and we run in to protect him, and the police run in and then begin to arrest everybody and use that to destroy that particular day. And the thing was just a march, but the conference was the centerpiece of it. That's where we were going to get together and dig deep. And the workers were coming from all over the state and some from Virginia. So it wasn't kind of a little thing. It was a big thing. And so on the very day that I got the parade permit, the very hour, within 5 minutes, the police gave it to the Klan and Nazis, with the information that we would not be armed. And then they actually, the Klan gathered, the police took pictures of them putting arsenals within the trunk of their car, which is immediately a violation, carrying a concealed weapon. Didn't stop them, drove 5 miles across town, and then the what do you call torturing that crowd?
Tactical unit.
Tactical unit was sent to early lunch. so that they would not be there. And the police who gave us the parade permit said they didn't know where the parade started. And so then the Klan drove in on it, and there were some people in our group who hit on some cars. Actually, they weren't people in the CWP, but when you have a rally in the neighborhood, all kind of people come. And people are upset about various things, and they see the Klan, and they say, get out of here. And they hit on the car, and it was the last car, which was well planned, that stopped well back from where the crowd was. Because the first truck had a guy fired out of the window, and all the people started to go away from the fire, and they were running into the arsenal of weapons in the last car. And that is a quick factual report of how that happened. And it could not have been an accident. Every piece of it was planned, and as Louis Pitts talked about it, you know, I finally got to talk to the Nazi Roland Wayne Wood. He was dying. He was on his sick bed. And Signe, whose husband he killed, and her son went over and talked to him. And he actually said he wanted to talk. And I sat out for a while, and then I joined Signe. And I asked him, why did you come over there and kill people like that? He said, because somebody that I thought was in the hierarchy of the Nazis, Bernard Bukovich, who was actually a BATF agent in Nazi uniform, told him, if you don't come and you don't bring your men and bring your gun, we're going to demote you. This is the BATF, the FBI, and the police working together to take this movement down. And I'm telling you, it wasn't just something casually done. It was because we were effective organizers, had pulled together the black community, and then working with workers. The workers were uniting, and the workers in the black community were beginning to unite. It was not a casual thing. And so I just want to put that in context. People do run in and shoot people for no reason, but when you plan it with the participation of the Greensboro police and the participation of the FBI, then they have a way to shut it down. And I pulled together, and I'll end with this, and then let us just kind of figure out how we're going to have the rest of this discussion. But because I was an organizer in the city, I knew the NAACP. We used their office as our office. People thought it was the poor people's office. And I went to Dr. Simpkins and said, we got to, by the way, I was in the jail the first night. They wouldn't give me a bond. But I got out the second day. And then, and he said, I'm in. I went to the editor of the Carolina Peacemaker, which was a black newspaper, Dr. Kilimanjaro. He said that I'm in. And I went to the leader of the Pulpit Forum, Reverend Gay, and he said that I'm in. Well, that's all I needed. 3 groups, and we had a base in the community. We could pull this together and fight back. The NAACP from New York called the president of the NAACP in Greensboro and said, you can't do that. The pastor that I was working with, his church was broken in. And actually, the word was that the CWP broke into the pastor's church, which makes no sense at all. I went to see him, and he had police on both sides of him because they had gotten him to believe that he was in danger from us. And then the poor black man that owned the newspaper said, I can't do this by myself. And so I just want to say that you don't know that history, Greensboro doesn't know that history, but that's the way stuff happens. And so I just want to say, there are deep lessons in this that we have to learn. And I'm going to commit myself not to talk so much because I do want to hear the questions and I do want us to engage on what are the lessons that pops up out of this that can anchor us as we go against a collapsing social order. And it's, you would have to be collapsing to elect somebody like Donald Trump to be your president. 62 million people pushed the button and pulled the lever. And actually, and it was basically a confluence of falsehoods and confusion and so forth So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we're here together. And we're going to slow this down and take a lot of questions and have a good discussion. You feel all right about that?
Could you talk a little bit about the Greensboro Peace and Reconciliation Commission that met? Because I think that's one place where we can learn, and it was historic.
Thank you. She's referring to the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was based on international models such as that in South Africa, but also Peru and several other models that we studied. And you've heard elements of our story where the courts failed us, the mainstream media failed us, even some of our friends in the social justice movement initially failed us. Even some of our friends that we had helped along the way in the community and in the mills, in the hospitals, wherever failed us, primarily out of fear and confusion. And that is what we're facing today, where we now, too many of us think that folk who are coming across the border because their farms have been ravaged, stolen, and they can no longer farm and feed their families, etc., are now called illegal aliens, immigrants, people who have a faith that might be different than ours, Muslims, people who may have a gender preference different from ours, LGBTQ community, are seen as the enemy. So that same kind of thing is being bred among us. But we were in a situation where public opinion was just not in our favor, and we were having difficulty getting the truth out. We continued to fight even after this event in '79. We thought about a lot of things, getting our FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act stuff. You get pages back and they were all redacted, a bunch of black pins, over it. So we finally came upon the idea of, why don't we do what they did in South Africa after all of the horrors of apartheid, what they've done in Peru with all the things that went on. And we were blessed to have the Archbishop Desmond Tutu himself visit Greensboro, sit with us 2 different times. And then monthly, representatives of South Africa came and sat with us and shared what they had done. Peter Story from South Africa happened to be at Duke for 2 years and helped us shape the process. So without any government support, in fact, government resistance, our city council voted against this truth and reconciliation and healing process. We said one time, what are they against truth, the reconciliation, healing, But we knew they were against the truth because our city government and some of the major manufacturers at that time were implicated in the death of our friends. So without any kind of officialdom, as that, if you depend on how you define officialdom support, we organizers and people in the community with whom we continue to work organized a Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation process. And if Nelson went to get the report, it's 529 pages, but it's an easy read, you know how reports are. But what's significant, it laid out the historical context, the causes, the sequence of events, and has within it recommendations about how Greensboro might move forward. It talks about, I'm struggling with some of the things, having this in our museums and what have you. We're making some progress on some of all those, but we've continued to fight. And it's not just about the lives of those 5 people, as precious as they are. It is about the lives, the possibility of life and life more abundantly of all of Greensboro. In fact, if you get one of the brochures from Beloved Community Center where Nelson and I work every day, we talk about transforming our entire city into a new era, which means it's not just a few people, but all people. Some of you have talked to have students at Guilford College who come through beloved community center and serve as interns and work. But people who work, people who govern, people who give medical care, people who teach, all the folk in Greensboro, we believe still deep in their hearts, just like we used to sing, and we shall overcome, that we shall overcome one day. So that's our purpose as long as we have life. Nelson's 76, I'm 72, Marty can tell our own age. She is younger than we are a little bit. This is what we've dedicated our lives. But thank you for the question, because we think that a lot of other cities, perhaps even this one, need to think about it, because the reality is all of our localities have some hidden histories that we refuse to look at. But I tell you, the wording that the truth shall set you free is true. Now the truth is bitter, as Alex Borain from South Africa told us, very bitter, but it does cleanse and set free. So I commend it to you in Northampton. If there are issues that not if, I know there are issues. You're living in America, Charlotte, people from the city of Charlottesville have been to Greensboro. The mayor, other elected officials, the mother has hired. 2 busloads came on the anniversary of Charlottesville, seeking from us what might we do. Some Native American nations who were subject to the horrible foster care and adoption process have come to Greensboro seeking some truth. But we've been talking to people from El Paso already. We've been to Mother Emanuel in Charleston. So really it's something that all communities can do. It is not easy, but this type of thing must be done. We've got to face the truth and heal ourselves and become what we were designed to be.
While he's giving somebody else, I just want to say, truth processes can be helpful. They are not a silver bullet. That we have to organize many different fronts. In our case, when the truth, darkness fell over the truth in a way that people just didn't have access to it. So we needed a particular mechanism. And we meticulously organized it and got 17 different groups. By the way, I want to acknowledge Marty's role in this. She got us in contact with the people who eventually funded us. So it takes a lot of different angles to get things to work. But we tried to set up a process so that there would be credibility. So we invited these 18 different groups to be a part, and they included the churches, the Jewish temples, the Muslim mosques. There were 3 Muslim groups. We had to mediate with them to get 1 representative. Nobody could do it but us. The NAACP, the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy, the police, and they all actually were invited to be a part. And I'm saying that because the outlook is you need to have somebody from every sector of society that they can identify with on the commission. And then there has to be a tenacious struggle. That's the selection process, by the way. Because who are the commissioners going to be and how do you get them selected? So you put up a selection process. That's the broad piece. Then they have to select, in our case, 7 people, 5 from Greensboro, 2 from anywhere else in the world. And that took a lot of time, and it was under constant critique and criticism. But I think we put together the most democratic process Greensboro has ever had. And actually, it selected 7 people who worked for 2 years. They had hearings, they went out in the community, they had TV programs, they had blogs, They had visits from people from around the world. We went down to Peru and met with the network of truth commissions. So it was a lot of work, and it's still going to produce some fruit. It has produced some already, but we think it's going to produce a lot more. And by the way, our city council voted to oppose the truth process, and there were 9 people on the city council. 3 African-American women voted for it, and the others, 6 white people voted against it. And then they had the audacity to say it had nothing to do with race. So that's just some of the particularities of it.
So Marty, you mentioned some in the film, something about when we were young there. And I think about that a lot, and I'd like to hear from all of you. Can you hear me? Yeah, so I'd like to hear from all of you just what have we or should we have learned in all this time that gives us a better perspective on where we are now and what happened there.
That's such a big question, but I'm going to try to answer from my perspective. I think that we need to understand solidarity, human dignity, and the universality of the need for both. And I think that in those 40 years of Reaganism and then Bushism and Clintonism, who threw everybody in jail, and now Trumpism, there have been a lot of substitutions for those things. And I think that we have to go dig deep into them and figure out how to increase the level of community throughout our country so that we can deal with the problems that we have. I think that we've tried individualism. We have tried professionalism. We have tried a lot of individual survival mechanisms, but I think that we have to focus on creating a community that, as I am concerned with most, can provide us with a sustainable earth. And that is what I have learned. I have learned to forgive others, to forgive myself, but to continue to be angry at what is evil. And I want to invite everybody in this room to figure out how we are going to make the movement that will cross the chasms of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, to unite us to defeat not just Trump, but the whole method of impoverishing millions and creating war, and while we destroy the environment. This is something that's in constant motion. But I think that it's something that we have been working together here in this town for a while on, and I think that we have to intensify like mad.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate it and agree with what you're saying. I'm going to try to focus on a couple of pieces of those as my memory works with me and against me. I first want to focus on the piece of learning the lesson of understanding and teaching and sharing the root causes of what we can see. We are seeing right now, and those of us who are my age and older have seen the racist, the white supremacist type divisions. And some of us falsely believed that they were gone, or at least dissipating. But we've got to look at why there's racism. And I know some of you here whom I've talked with or involved with or familiar with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival, which identifies 5 pieces, in particular talks about poverty. And the chasm, the disparities of poverty has gotten worse in our prosperous country. Racism, an economy that's based on war of our brothers and sisters who are from other countries who then show up here knocking on the door and get caged. The false narrative, I'm leaving one out, this view that there's some people who are inherently better than others based on their ethnicity or their religious beliefs or whatever. But those kind of systemic pieces and really embrace each other. And that gets me to the other piece that we learned, and that is that when we were hit, there was a false narrative put out that we were doing this to try to elevate our reputations. And so much so that we were actually prepared to get ourselves and our children killed. Nelson's and my daughters were 7 and 8 years old at that time. They were there along the line. We saw some of the clips, a little boy in the neighborhood streaking back. That was in a community that I did a lot of organizing, Morningside homes, 400 units of, at that point, I think all black people crammed in, trying to make a living, most of them working at that mill, the mills. But in fact, we were being successful. But when you're successful against a big entrenched system that hides itself like the Wizard of Oz, or the Emperor with no clothes, then people are often confused. But we were teaching that truth, and we're successful at it, so we were hit. But when we got hit, part of how we have been able to sustain ourselves, we're old folk now, just like a lot of y'all in here. But we are still friends. So as we talked with the younger people yesterday, we talked about the importance of relationships. While we were in the organization, CWP, Workers Viewpoint Organization, we talked a lot about having the correct view, the correct line, if that's familiar to anybody in here. And that was important. But what has sustained us has been the relationships. The appreciation for one another, though we were black, we were white, we were Chinese, we were Vietnamese. We lived in Hawaii, we lived in North Carolina, we lived in California. We had meetings with people translating into 4 or 5 different languages in corners. We didn't have those nice machines you have now. Those relationships continue today. Not that we all believe the same thing and what have you, but there's an appreciation of one another, and that's what this country, this world needs. So deep relationships that are led by the heart, not just something you read on the paper. I'm an educator like a lot of you in here. That's important to have that information, but the heart leading and sustaining us, whether you act it out through religion or whatever, but the heart part of us that connects all of us is what's so important. So those are the things I would share. Nelson, you want to add anything? I see some of my hands.
Just very quickly, I want to affirm that the absolute necessity to struggle and not allow the inevitable pushback to stop you from doing that. That's one lesson. And we would not even be here, and you would not be here, if we had not persisted in pushing back. And in that process, when you're doing good work, you will come under some kind of attack. Know that. And don't, I think we have to learn to flip the script. When people attack you and you're organizing like that, there are people that just get attacked because certain levels of madness have been loosed in the country. But when you're organizing and they attack you, don't think so much in terms of defeat. There is a word out of our book of faith that said, blessed are you when people revile you and talk all manner of evil against you. And then there's the phrase, for righteousness' sake. And then it goes on to say, be exceedingly glad. I had to struggle with, why am I glad about being publicly attacked and demeaned? I actually got a hold to it. It is an affirmation of your work.
Yes.
Don't allow them to flip the script on you. People wouldn't bother to take the time to wage these heavyweight struggles against you if it was a meaningless thing you were doing. So we interpret that as that you're on the right track. Stay there, dig in, get more creative, and keep struggling. That's a lesson that I've learned from that. The other thing, very quickly, is we've got to seek every opportunity to reduce rivalry among the movement and within the movement. And sometimes that means struggling hard for a particular point of view, but not struggling hard for everything. You know, you have to begin to build connections between different groups. I think those, in addition to what Marty and Joyce has already raised, would be 2 points that I would add to what they lifted up already.
I guess first of all, I want to just thank you for coming here and speaking. You speak truth and beauty, and it's a wonderful thing. I also want to say there were 2 people that died in this part of the world, and both of them spoke about doing more. And sort of their lives were dedicated to trying to redress troubles. Francis Crowe, who lived here, and Michael Ann Busey, who lived in Springfield and was the head of Arise for Social Justice. And your presentation today, plus those memorial services and the lives of those people, call on me to do more, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I appreciate you guys adding even more force to the message that we have to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. With remember Dr. Steve Jones, who's a climate hero. And I wanted to just augment a little bit. I think that the mutual support in our movement, the reason I completely support the Green New Deal, for instance, is because it attempts to give power to all the different struggles that need to be addressed in society. It doesn't just say we got to cut emissions, you know, which we do. And I think that every day of our life we have to figure out how to manifest the love that we're talking about by supporting the Immigrant Rights March that I expect to see. I actually am not going to be able to go to, but it's going to be starting, as I understand, at Pulaski Park in 25 minutes. And I hope after you leave here, pardon?
Right now, 4 o'clock.
Yeah, it's 3:30 right now, 3:30 to 5. So I'll see you over, I won't see you over there, but I hope a lot of you go, because immigrant rights are human rights. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking human rights, which includes the right for all of us to live decently with dignity and for our future generations to do the same. And we manifest it right now. And also I'm going to take a plug. There were a whole bunch of 25 different groups supported what we're doing today, and I want to thank you very much.
A question for Nelson. When you met that Nazi on his deathbed, did he express remorse?
He expressed it. It was difficult to take it all sincere. And that's because I saw what he did. And he said that he believed that God had forgiven him, but he hadn't forgiven himself. And I chose not to challenge him on that. But I think when he came before the Truth Commission, he didn't tell the depths of the things that he did wrong. And so, yes, there was some expression of remorse, but I think that at the end of the day, there was a lot more that he should have told the commission that he did not tell them.
One more right here.
Listening to this, to me, there's a big elephant in the room, which is that I believe that that Trump will be impeached, that we'll see a change come our way, but I don't believe that it will end peacefully. I believe that the Klan, being fed by corporate America, the corporate world, global world, are being funded and fueled very much by that. The Klan is alive and well, heavily armed. And as victims of Greensboro, I wonder if you could just say something to that. Please, tell me if I'm wrong.
Nobody has the corner on truth and all the information, so I share with you what I see, and I will look at what you see and see if we can grow a little bit. I think that this country is in deep, deep trouble. A symbol of it is that it elected the person that it elected. And 62 million people came to the view that this was the best person among those out there to represent us. I think that there are militias being built up now. In fact, I know they are. I was out to Portland and down in Seattle, Washington State. I didn't realize the degree to which militias are actually already existing. I think that if Trump had not won, that the militias would be playing an even greater role than they're playing now. And so I think your assessment that Trump, his own Cohen, who was his lawyer, said he didn't believe that Trump would leave office peacefully, that he would call the whole election a fake election, a fraud election, and he would try to mobilize an insurrection. I don't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly. And I think that we should not take it lightly. It's not a guarantee, but it's a real possibility that the nation may go that way, because there's a level, help me with the right word, I want to say insanity, but that doesn't sound exactly right. But there's a level of thinking now that has grown out of the over-against orientation, where people are actually invested and almost affirm themselves not by who they really are potentially, but by who they are against. And once you get that rolling, you set up a dangerous situation, and with the moral and ethical level being reduced. And really, I'm a retired pastor. I'm ashamed of some of the behavior of Christendom. This is bad stuff. People are talking in ways that just blind them to the truth and herd people into hating other people and then actually killing them, you know? This is happening now. So I think what you're raising needs to be taken seriously. We don't need to actually react to it in a way that complements it, but we need to react to it in a way by reaching out deeper and harder and faster to unite more people. And somebody told me, don't start with the people who are most backward. I need a word for that.
The caboose.
Yes, don't start with the caboose. Organize the engine. And if the connections are right, one car hooked to another car hooked to another car, the caboose will move too. But if you start with the caboose, you ain't going nowhere. The people who are acting in such a way that's just not open right now to hearing something. You have to start with who is willing to hear it and work your way out in that process.
So I certainly agree with that, and just would add that we have to all increasingly act out of a depth of love for humankind, the earth that sustains us, and with the hope and belief that we can come together in love. Because fear is what we're already operating out of. Fear of one another, and the set gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And fear has us lashing out at one another, even ourselves. So as we see that I am in you and you in me, then that's what hope is. And we've got to believe that. That's just not some words some people read on Sunday or Friday or Saturday or whenever you might go to worship, or just your own time at home with your friends. We've got to operate out of that, because otherwise we will sit here and frighten ourselves. When you see, that's one trepidation I have by even showing that footage. It brings tears to me, but it also makes me realize that it can frighten you into, oh my God, I'm just going to shrink back. This is no time to shrink back. But we have to surge forward with that love and that hope and that possibility. For us, it was the truth process, and just continue to fight on issues as we have been and continue to do in Greensboro. I don't know what form that takes. Marty said a few things about it, but the fifth plank and the poor people's thing is ecological devastation, which is very consistent with the climate change. But talk to your families, talk to your neighbors, people you work with, talk to your officials. Thank you again for that resolution from the city council here. We the people, that's real. We the people have the solutions if we walk toward each other. That was the sermon this morning. Yeah. We already know how to walk against each other. So let's end this maybe with a song or something. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Keep on walking, keep on talking. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Ain't gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom way. Immigration ain't gonna let no immigration turn me around. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.